I found a folder with documents in our home safe that had never been there before. 30 years. 3 decades I had been building my life with Daphne in El Monte, developing my chain of gyms while she commuted daily to her accounting firm in downtown Los Angeles. My name was Jack, and I had always believed our life was the perfect picture of the American dream. A house in a quiet neighborhood, a successful business, stability. Children didn't work out. Daphne had medical issues when she was young, but we accepted it and lived for ourselves. October 2024 started like any ordinary month. Fallen leaves from the maple tree by our porch, cool mornings when I left at 5 a.m. to check on my 3 gyms. Leon, my oldest friend from college and simultaneously the manager of my main gym, called me that Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. Jack, we need to talk. Not over the phone. We met at a small coffee shop on Valley Boulevard 20 minutes later. Leon looked as if he had to tell me about someone close dying. I don't know how to say this, he began, rotating a paper cup in his hands. Last week I was in Santa Monica at a fitness equipment conference. I stopped by that hotel near the pier for lunch, the Ocean View. And I saw Daphne. She was entering a room with a man. Not at the reception desk. Straight to the room through the side entrance. They had a key card. At first I didn't believe it. Daphne drove to clients every Tuesday. It was her standard practice. Santa Monica was almost 45 kilometers from El Monte, about an hour's drive without traffic. Quite possible if she had a client there. Are you sure? My throat went dry. Jack, I've known your wife for 30 years. It was her. They were holding hands. I returned home earlier than usual. Daphne was cooking dinner, as always on Tuesdays, her signature salmon with vegetables. She was smiling, talking about some tax reports about her colleague Letitia who had messed up the quarterly statements again. How was the client in Santa Monica? I asked casually. She didn't flinch, even the pause was natural. Santa Monica? I haven't been there in about 5 months. All my clients now are either downtown or in Pasadena. A lie. The first lie I had definitively registered. The next morning I drove to an electronics store in San Gabriel and bought a miniature GPS tracker. That evening, while Daphne was taking a shower, I secured it under the front bumper of her Honda Accord, where she would never look. The device synced with an app on my phone. The first 3 days, nothing special. Work, the supermarket, her favorite yoga studio on Garvey Avenue. But on Friday evening, when she said she was going to her firm's corporate party, the dot on the map went in the opposite direction, north to Pasadena, and stopped at a residential complex on Orange Grove Boulevard. It stayed there until 11 at night. I drove there at 10:30. Parked across the street. Watched as she exited the entrance with a man about 50 years old, neat, wearing glasses. They kissed by her car, not quickly, not furtively. A long, tender kiss of people who weren't ashamed of their feelings. I felt something break inside but forced myself to sit and observe. The man returned to the building. I memorized the entrance and apartment number. He went in and a window lit up on the 3rd floor, second from the left. The next morning I hired a private investigator through an acquaintance from the gym, William, a former police officer who now handled civilian cases. 2 days later he gave me a complete report. The man's name was Kent Reeves, 52 years old, director of a private daycare called Bright Minds in Pasadena. Divorced, no children. Had been living in that same apartment on Orange Grove for 6 years. Now here's the interesting part, William told me during our in-person meeting. I dug deeper because you're paying. Kent Reeves isn't some random person. Until last year he lived in El Monte. On the same street as you on Rosemead Boulevard, a house 3 down from yours. He was your neighbor. I froze. A neighbor. A man I had seen dozens of times when I left in the morning when I mowed the lawn. We even nodded hello. He moved to Pasadena last November, almost a year ago. I remembered how Daphne had casually mentioned then, Kent is selling his house, moving closer to work. 30 years of marriage and I didn't know my wife knew our neighbor by name. One more thing, William handed me a printout. Hotel reservations. Your wife and Kent Reeves, same room at the Ocean View in Santa Monica, every Tuesday for the past 9 months. Always from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. Cash payment from his side so credit cards wouldn't show up. 9 months. 40 Tuesdays. 40 times she had driven to clients. I couldn't just come home and make a scene. I had too much to lose and Daphne knew about all my accounts, about the business structure, about every asset. She was an accountant. She could take half of everything I had built over 30 years. Maybe even more if she hired the right lawyer. I called my corporate attorney and financial consultant. Explained the situation. Over 2 weeks we conducted a complex operation. My personal assets were transferred to the gym's corporate accounts. 3 offshore structures were created in the Cayman Islands that formerly owned shares in my business. On paper, I suddenly became a hired director with a minimal salary, while the main money belonged to corporations. The house was transferred to Leon as a gift to a partner, with documents dated 2 years earlier. All this cost me considerable money on lawyers and consultants, but I knew Daphne wasn't just cheating. She was planning. Because William found something else. For the past 2 months, Daphne had been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts to a new account opened in her name. Small amounts, $2,000 to $3,000 at a time, so it wouldn't be noticeable. But in total, already almost $70,000. She was preparing to run. On Tuesday, October 29th, I tracked her on GPS. As always, a trip to Santa Monica. I called Leon and 2 other friends from the gym. We drove after her. The Ocean View Hotel turned out to be a nice 3-story building 2 blocks from the pier. I knew the room number. William had gotten this information from his acquaintance in administration. Room 237, 2nd floor. At 3 in the afternoon we stood at the door. I called in a hotel employee who for $100 agreed to accidentally mistake the door. When the door opened, I walked inside. Daphne sat on the bed in a robe. Kent stood by the window in just jeans. Both froze when they saw me. Jack. Daphne tried to say something, but I raised my hand. 30 years, I said quietly. 30 years I considered you my family. Kent took a step toward me. Listen, man, I can explain everything. You don't need to explain anything. I looked only at Daphne. 9 months. 40 Tuesdays. Clients in Santa Monica. You're an accountant, Daphne. You should have known that numbers always reveal the truth. Her face first tried to portray shock, then confusion, but when she realized I knew everything, the expression changed. Became cold. Alien. You never truly loved me, she said. You loved your business. Your gyms. I was just part of your image as a successful man. That's your justification? I didn't recognize this voice. 30 years, Daphne. Kent understands me. He listens when I talk. A neighbor, I interrupted. Our neighbor. How many times did we invite him to barbecues? How many times did he smile to my face? Kent lowered his eyes. At least he was ashamed. I placed an envelope with photographs, printouts of GPS tracks, and hotel statements on the table. Divorce. Lawyers will contact you tomorrow. Don't try to take anything, Daphne. Because what I found about your financial manipulations with our accounts, that's already criminal prosecution. Her face changed again. Now there was fear. What? What manipulations? $70,000, I said. Transferred from our joint accounts without my consent. In California, that's a crime. Theft in especially large amounts from marital property. William already passed all the documents to my lawyer. Actually, this was a half-truth. That money was from our joint accounts, and formally she had the right to transfer it. But she didn't know that for sure, and fear is a wonderful tool. You'll take everything, she finally understood. Everything I invested for 30 years. You invested? I laughed, but without any joy. You worked as an accountant. I built the business. You lived in my house, drove a car I bought, used credit cards I paid for. That's not fair, she was already shouting. I have a right to half. You had a right to half, I nodded. Until the moment you decided to steal $70,000 and plan an escape. Now we'll talk about fairness in court. Kent tried to intervene. Jack, be a man. This is between you two, no need. Shut up, I looked at him for the first time. You, a daycare director who's screwing another man's wife in a hotel every Tuesday. What do you think the parents of your students will say when they find out about your moral qualities? He went pale. You wouldn't dare. I already called a journalist friend from the local Pasadena newspaper. I lied. She was very interested in the story about a daycare director who destroys other people's families. It was a lie, but he didn't know. And Daphne didn't know either. I left the room and left them there. Leon was waiting downstairs by the car. How did it go? As it should have. I got in the car. Let's go home. The next 2 months were hell with legal battles. Daphne hired a lawyer, but her position was weak. That transfer of $70,000 wasn't actually a crime, but it created the picture of a woman who was planning a divorce and hiding assets. My assets suddenly disappeared. On paper I was almost bankrupt. All the business belonged to offshore companies, the house, gifted to Leon 2 years ago. Her lawyer tried to dig, but my lawyers were better. And more expensive. In December the court issued a ruling. Divorce without property division. since formerly I had no property. Daphne received her car and the right to take personal belongings. Everything. But the real revenge was different. Because I actually did call, not a journalist, but several parents from the Bright Minds daycare where Kent worked. Told them the story about a director who for 9 months had been having an affair with a married woman, planning to divorce her from her husband. Showed them photographs, documents from the hotel. The parent committee raised a scandal. Kent was forced to resign voluntarily by the end of December. His reputation in Pasadena's educational circles was destroyed. And then I made another call. Bertha, an accountant from the firm where Daphne worked, was my client at the gym. We happened to talk in January, already after the divorce. You know, Jack, she told me after a workout, we had an audit at our firm in December. Found interesting things in documents that Daphne handled. Small additions here and there, redirected payments. Nothing big but systematic. She was fired in January, and now the firm's owners are thinking about whether to sue. I said nothing. Just nodded. Although it was I who anonymously sent the auditors a tip about where to look. Daphne lost her job. Lost her reputation in the Los Angeles accounting community, and it's a tight-knit community. Her name circulated as an unreliable employee with questionable ethics. But most importantly, she lost Kent. Because Kent, having lost his job, reputation, and prospects, got scared. He wasn't ready for real consequences. In February, I accidentally learned from William that Kent had moved to his sister's place in Oregon. Changed his phone number. Blocked Daphne everywhere. He ran away. From her, from the scandal, from everything. Daphne was left alone. Without a husband, without a lover, without a job, without money. Those $70,000 quickly melted away on lawyers and apartment rent. Without the pension savings she had been accumulating for 30 years, they were in a joint account that also disappeared into the corporate structure. I saw her for the last time in March. By chance at a gas station on Valley Boulevard. She was filling up an old Toyota. Probably found a cheap car somewhere instead of the Honda. Our eyes met across the road. I didn't approach. Just got in my new Lexus and drove away. Leon returned the house to me in April. Simply transferred it back with the same historical documents. The offshore companies transferred assets to new corporate structures already in my name. The lawyers worked flawlessly. Now, in May, as I sit on the terrace of my house in El Monte and look at that same maple tree that was dropping leaves last October, I think about justice. Daphne wanted to run away with Kent, taking half of my property. She planned it, collected money, built a new life on the ruins of the old one. Instead, she lost everything. Absolutely everything. Property, money, pension, job, reputation, lover. 30 years of life turned to zero in 3 months. Is this fair? I don't know. But these are the consequences. Because when you build betrayal, you need to be sure the foundation will hold. And Daphne built on sand. And everything crumbled from one phone call from Leon that October Tuesday. Sometimes I ask myself if she ever loved me. If there were any real moments in those 30 years. But then I remember her cold face in that hotel room when she said, "You never truly loved me." And I understand, she didn't care. She loved Kent. She lost Kent. Everything else is just a bonus to revenge. And me? I opened a 4th gym in Baldwin Park last month. Business is thriving. Leon is now a full partner with 20%. Life goes on. I just now know the price of trust. And I know that when someone says, "You don't understand me," it actually means, I've already found someone who does. And that's a completely different conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click like if you enjoy this story. I always read your comments and analyze which stories you like best so that I can create better stories. Thank you. I will continue the story. The discovery in the safe wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of understanding how deep the deception went. That folder contained printed emails, hotel receipts, even a draft lease agreement for an apartment in Pasadena. Daphne and Kent had been planning their future together for months, maybe longer. Every detail was calculated, every step prepared. They were going to wait until after the holidays, file for divorce in January, and then coincidentally, start dating a few months later to avoid suspicion. I sat in my home office that night, spreading out all the documents William had gathered alongside what I'd found in the safe. The pattern was clear. Daphne had been living a double life with the precision of an accountant. Which, of course, she was. Tuesday afternoons weren't the only time. There were weekend girls' trips, that were actually stays at Kent's apartment. There were late nights at the office, that the GPS tracker revealed were spent at restaurants in Pasadena, intimate dinners where they held hands across the table and planned their future. What hurt most wasn't the physical betrayal, bodies can heal. It was the premeditation. The cold calculation. The way she had looked me in the eye every morning for 9 months and smiled, kissed me goodbye, and then driven to another man's arms. The way she had discussed our retirement plans while simultaneously draining our accounts. The way she had pretended to care about my business while plotting to take half of it. I remembered our anniversary dinner in September. We'd gone to that expensive Italian place in Pasadena, ironically, probably minutes from Kent's apartment. She'd worn that blue dress I'd always loved, and we talked about maybe finally taking that trip to Italy we'd been postponing for years. She'd held my hand across the table, looked into my eyes, told me she loved me. All lies. Every word, every gesture, every smile, calculated deception. The GPS tracker showed she'd gone to Kent's apartment that same night after dropping me home. She told me she needed to go back to the office for an urgent client issue. She'd stayed there until 2 in the morning. William's report included interviews with some of Kent's neighbors in the Pasadena complex. They'd seen Daphne there regularly. One elderly woman thought they were married. Such a nice couple, she'd said. They'd walked dogs together in the morning, even though neither of them had a dog. They'd gone grocery shopping together, holding hands in the produce section. They'd hosted dinner parties in his apartment for his friends, where Daphne played the perfect partner. She'd built an entire alternative life. While I was waking up at 5 a.m. to manage my gyms, working 60-hour weeks to build our future, she was building a different future with another man. The financial records William uncovered were particularly damning. The $70,000 from our joint accounts was just the visible part. She'd also been redirecting small payments from some of her accounting clients, amounts so small that the clients wouldn't notice, maybe $50 or $100 here and there, but over months it added up to thousands more. She'd created a hidden account, slowly building a nest egg for her new life. Kent's financial situation was interesting too. His daycare director's salary was decent but not exceptional. He'd been divorced 5 years ago, and his ex-wife had taken most of their assets. He was essentially starting over financially. Meeting Daphne, with her access to my money, with her share of what she thought she'd get in a divorce, must have seemed like winning the lottery. I wondered if he'd actually loved her or if it was always about the money. The romantic in me, the part that still existed despite everything, wanted to believe people were better than that. But the realist, the businessman who had built 3 successful gyms from nothing, knew that money changes people. Money makes people do terrible things. The evidence William gathered included photographs. Not just of them entering hotels or his apartment, but intimate moments. Them kissing in his car in a parking lot. Them walking hand in hand through a park in Pasadena. Them at a movie theater, her head on his shoulder. Each photograph was another knife in my gut, but I forced myself to look at all of them. I needed to see the truth completely, no matter how much it hurt. There was one photograph that particularly destroyed me. They were at a restaurant, not the Ocean View Hotel, but a nice place near the Pasadena City Hall. It must have been someone's birthday because there was a small cake on the table. Kent was feeding Daphne a piece of cake and she was laughing, her eyes bright with genuine happiness. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her laugh like that with me. Maybe years ago. Maybe never. That's when I realized the full scope of what I'd lost. Not just a wife who cheated, that was painful but survivable. I'd lost something I'd never actually had. A partner who loved me. Maybe she had loved me once in the beginning. Maybe those first few years were real. But somewhere along the way, I'd become just a provider, a comfortable life, a stability she took for granted while her heart was elsewhere. The night after I confronted them at the hotel, I didn't sleep. I sat in my home office, the office in the house I'd bought 15 years ago, the house where we'd hosted countless dinner parties and holiday gatherings, the house where I'd imagined growing old with her, and I made lists. Lists of assets, lists of evidence, lists of people who needed to know what had happened. Leon came over around midnight. He called first, heard something in my voice and just came. We sat in the kitchen drinking coffee. I couldn't stomach anything stronger, and he listened while I talked. I told him everything, showed him everything. He didn't judge, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just listened. You know what the worst part is? I finally said as dawn started breaking through the kitchen window. I keep thinking about all the times I could have noticed, all the signs I missed. The way she started going to the gym more regularly 6 months ago. I thought she was just being healthy. The new perfume she bought. The way she'd shower as soon as she got home on Tuesdays. The way she'd put her phone face down on the table. All these little things that I dismissed or explained away. Don't do that to yourself, Leon said. You trusted her. That's not a weakness. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. Yeah, well, look where trust got me. The legal preparations were intricate. My attorney, a sharp woman named Valerie who specialized in high-asset divorces, was blunt about my situation. Normally, 30 years of marriage means she gets half of everything, she explained during our first meeting. California is a community property state. But we have some factors in our favor. The financial manipulation gives us leverage. The systematic deception suggests bad faith. And if we can restructure your assets before she files, and she will file, Jack, probably within weeks, we can protect a significant portion. What about the business? I asked. That was my biggest concern. The gyms weren't just assets. They were my life's work, my identity. The business is our priority, Valerie said. We'll create a corporate structure that separates your personal assets from the business assets. It's complex and it needs to happen fast, but it's doable. I've done it before. She introduced me to a financial consultant named Raymond, a man in his 60s who had helped countless business owners through divorces. Over the next 2 weeks, Raymond and I worked late into the nights, restructuring everything. The offshore companies were his idea, illegal, but complex enough that Daphne's lawyer would have trouble unraveling them in time. The key, Raymond explained, is that we're not hiding assets illegally. We're reorganizing business structures in ways that are perfectly legitimate for tax and liability purposes. The fact that it also protects them in a divorce is just a side benefit. The house transfer to Leon was more complicated. We had to backdate documents, create a paper trail that showed the transfer happened 2 years ago. It required some creative accounting and the cooperation of Leon's lawyer, but it was technically legal. Gifts between business partners weren't uncommon, and we'd been partners for years. If anyone challenges this seriously, it might not hold up, Valerie warned. But it will create enough confusion and delay that by the time it's resolved, other aspects of the divorce will be settled. While the legal and financial preparations happened, I continued my surveillance. The GPS tracker showed Daphne's pattern hadn't changed. Every Tuesday, Santa Monica. Every Friday evening, Pasadena. She was brazen about it, secure in her belief that I suspected nothing. I wanted to confront her immediately, but Valerie insisted I wait. The longer you wait, the more time we have to protect your assets, she said. Every day counts. Use this time to gather more evidence, build a stronger case. The confrontation can wait. So I waited. I smiled at Daphne over breakfast. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I asked about her day when she came home. And every moment felt like acting in a play, reading lines that meant nothing. She must have felt something was off because one evening she asked, "Is everything okay? You seem distant." The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Instead I said, "Just stressed about the business. We're negotiating a new equipment contract and the numbers aren't working out." She bought it. Or pretended to. "You work too hard," she said, kissing my cheek. "Maybe we should take a vacation. Get away for a while." A vacation. With her lover waiting in Pasadena. With her planning to leave me. The audacity was breathtaking. "Maybe," I said. "Let's see how things go." That night, after she fell asleep, I looked at her in the dim light from the hallway. She looked peaceful, content. No guilt disturbed her sleep. No remorse troubled her dreams. She was at peace with her betrayal, comfortable with her deception. I felt nothing. The anger had burned through me and left something cold and hard in its place. This wasn't the woman I'd married. Maybe that woman had never existed. Maybe I'd been in love with an illusion, a role she played, while the real Daphne was someone I'd never known. The day I chose for the confrontation wasn't random. It was October 29th, exactly 1 week before our wedding anniversary. I wanted her to remember that. I wanted the date to be significant, to mark the end as clearly as our anniversary had marked the beginning. William's contact at the hotel had been helpful. For an extra $100, he'd not only let us into the room but had also confirmed that Kent and Daphne had a reservation for that afternoon. Room 237, they always requested the same room apparently. They were creatures of habit, secure in their secret world. Leon and my 2 other friends, trainers from my gyms named Ricardo and James, came with me for moral support and, if I'm honest, physical security. I didn't think Kent would get violent, but I wanted to be prepared. We arrived at the hotel at 2:30, giving them time to get comfortable, to feel safe. Standing outside that door I felt strangely calm. The moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for weeks was finally here. My hand didn't shake as I knocked. The look on Daphne's face when the door opened and she saw me standing there, that was worth everything. Pure shock, the kind you can't fake. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. Behind her, Kent was scrambling to put on a shirt, his face going red. Thank you for watching this video. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.